great to be here.
Are we going to sit or stand?
Yeah, I guess we're going to sit. It's going to be less of a show than the previous one. So we're going to talk about ReFi this morning with all of you, where we are with ReFi, what is ReFi, what we are doing in ReFi, what are the key nice things to be coming this year in ReFi, so you will try to cover it all. And of course, we'll also cover a bit about the carbon market. This is a topic at heart for Phil and myself. But first, yeah, let's do a short intro. Phil, do you want to go?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Phil Fogel. I'm one of the co-founders of Flow Carbon. Flow Carbon is building blockchain infrastructure for the voluntary carbon market. We're building tokenization bridges that bring voluntary carbon credits onto blockchain, as well as building financing vehicles for carbon projects on chain.
Thank you. So I'm Fred, the co-founder and CEO of the Open Forest Protocol, which is a measurement, reporting, and verification platform for forest projects, obviously, where we provide the necessary tech for the people on the ground to measure the forest, their activities, report it, do the verification in this decentralized way, and gain value from it in the form of carbon credits. And that's why also we are partnering with amazing companies in this space, this new ReFi space. So maybe we'll do an ask to the small crowd this morning, who actually have heard about ReFi already. Oh, that's pretty good.
Nice,
I would
nice.
say 80%. Cool. Okay. So who is able to actually explain what ReFi is? Would you feel confident explaining that? No one? Yeah, one person. Okay, cool. So Phil.
Want me to do it, or you want to shout it out?
Okay, I don't think we catch it all, but Phil.
Sounded about right. I mean, in general, the idea behind ReFi is to create regenerative finance. So how do you create financial systems and economic models that regenerate the planet and regenerate humanity? Anything, and I also like to extend the definition to anything in a financial system that tries to remove extraction. So anytime you have a financial system where there are intermediaries or entities that could be automated that currently are taking a large take rate, that you can actually create a system that reduces that take rate, that's a regenerative system as well, because it's actually making the system more efficient and more effective. And all of the things that we're doing on the intersection between climate, carbon, and Web3, those are also regenerative systems that we're trying to build straight economic models for.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe then we can do a bit of a history on ReFi, because it's very new. So for us, when we started our project back in end of 2020, there was no mention of ReFi. We just, doing our thing, and eventually a year later, 2021 was starting to be kind of an emergence of different companies, different protocols, doing different things in ReFi, mostly to this point around carbon, but not only. We're seeing more and more things towards waste, towards plastic, towards ESG, awesome protocols and companies building on those topics. But yeah, I think it would be great to actually explain also how we came to work together. That's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a really interesting space that's been developing over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. I think since the birth of non-Bitcoin based blockchains, people have been thinking about what other use cases can you build with them and how can you build impact use cases into blockchains. And since 2017, there have been a bunch of projects that have actually been building at the intersection of carbon and Web3. But as you said, it wasn't until 2021 that we actually saw an explosion of the space. In fact, at ETHDenver last year, there was a Climate X Web3 event, and there were about 50 people there. Yesterday, we co-hosted a climate summit, and there were 499 people there. So it's nearly a 10x increase in terms of the community, and I imagine it's a similar increase in the size of the companies and protocols that are building in the space.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. What is also super interesting in ReFi is that it's a space where the discussion are also taking place outside of the Web3 environment. I think that we are seeing that ourselves currently, where because of what's happening in the carbon market, because of the transparency issues, all those issues coming to the real world that are discussed in the main media, we are also now, us as Web3 companies, being more visible, and that's actually super interesting, because then the discussion is actually moving outside of the Web3, is more of a discussion of impact. How do we can actually change things for more transparency, more impact, and more engagement towards the climate.
Yeah, and it's really exciting to actually see a ton of investors coming into the space as well. So you have a community that's growing, you have protocols and builders that are growing in this space, and there are, in the last couple months, 3 dedicated ReFi venture funds came out. Some of the largest investors in the space are investing in ReFi, A16Z, for example, as well as Variant, and a bunch of other big funds, General Catalyst, are all investing in this space and paying attention to this space. So it's really a growing space that we really welcome everyone to sort of get involved in and see how we can build bigger and better regenerative systems.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's the time to actually talk about a great announcement that was announced yesterday at the Climate Summit, and it's an announcement for Near and for Carbon, so Phil, take it away.
Yeah, so yesterday we announced a partnership with the Near Foundation where we're going to be bringing carbon credits into the Near ecosystem, and that there's going to ultimately, hopefully, be protocol level offsetting that's done by the Near ecosystem. Near has already been audited and bought offsets in the past to make sure that it hit a carbon neutral level, and now we're hoping to do that sort of at the protocol level so that it becomes embedded in the protocol. And what's really cool about this is that what we're seeing happen across the entire Web3 is that the core infrastructure of Web3 and of L1s is actually baking carbon offsetting into them. So they're actually going beyond being carbon neutral, going into being carbon negative. And this is a really strong signal that's sent out that our core infrastructure has this regenerative element that's baked into it. And so super excited to see Near do this, hoping that lots of other protocols out there start to bake in carbon offsetting directly into it. And to that end, one of the interesting things about this market, and the carbon market specifically, is there have been a couple of attempts at experimentation of tokenizing carbon credits over the course of the last 5 years. And as we mentioned, in 2021, there was sort of this watershed event where a ton of carbon credits came on chain very quickly in the middle of, basically at the height of the last bull run. And it became very interesting. And what happened is that the legacy carbon market, the existing standard bodies who issue carbon credits, they took notice of this and they're like, hold on, what is this? Right, and for people like me who have been in this space, in sort of the impact blockchain space for a while, we've been having we're trying to have conversations with these standards bodies to convince them that blockchain is the right technology stack for carbon credits and to help scale this market. And for years, those conversations have fallen on deaf ears, and all of a sudden, they woke up and they said, whoa, what's going on here? They put a pause on it and said, we need to actually now look at this. And what was really, frankly, amazing about this is instead of saying, well, let's not do this, let's stop it, we're not exploring this, the entire industry, the 3 largest issuers of carbon credits that cover nearly 80% of all issuance of carbon credits, actually engaged in a formal process to say, in the same way that they normally do, for any sort of innovation and technology, to say, okay, how do we adopt this? How do we build this? And earlier this week, the 2nd largest issuer of carbon credits, Gold Standard, actually put out its formal announcement that it is moving forward with tokenization of carbon credits in an official way. What's amazing about this is I don't know of any other industry in the world where the actual issuing bodies of an asset have come together and said, we are going to study and figure out how to use blockchain technology to move our industry forward and to help scale it. So this is a really massive event in the, I think, history of Web3, as well as certainly the history of the voluntary carbon market.
Yeah, and on top of that, also what's super interesting to see is that talking about carbon credits, there are big issues on how they are data backed, and today it's really opaque. So it's really hard to actually, from a buyer perspective, and obviously for Near, they've been there, and on many other corporates, and maybe some of you in the room, when you have ever tried to buy a carbon credit, it's almost impossible to actually know what you're buying. And our take here as a Web3 not only open source protocol, but at also different protocols building on Web3 is to say now you can actually have everything that is data backed, so you can actually see what is happening from the data capture from the ground and there are many companies building in that space. We are obviously focused on forests for the moment because that's it's a big part of how we can draw down carbon for addressing the climate issue. But I think that's super interesting to see because we see, as Phil said, the usual standards moving to Web3. We see new companies in Web3 addressing the opaque or transparent issues with data-backed credits. So it's basically, we see this kind of merge between those two industries. How fast it's going to go and exactly how it's going to go, that's still to be seen. But it's really interesting to see that it's happening very fast, actually. So it's in the last couple of months and maybe a year.
Yeah, well, I think it's almost worth backing up for 1 second just to make sure everyone is on the same page about what a carbon credit actually is and how they get used. So the way a carbon credit works is a project goes somewhere in the world and it does something that either prevents the emission of carbon into the atmosphere or actually removes carbon from the atmosphere. So in the simple example of forestry, planting some trees absorb carbon and store that carbon, so you can get a carbon credit issued for that. The reason why you have a carbon credit issued for that activity is it makes it economically viable. And the use case for a carbon credit is that a polluter, right, generally speaking corporates and also individuals who are emitting carbon into the atmosphere can basically buy that carbon offset and use that to neutralize their emissions. And this is part of, in the race to net zero that we have to get to in terms of carbon emissions, offsetting is part of a healthy diet, so to speak, of reducing your emissions, but offsetting the balance and offsetting those things that are hard to emit. And so if you now go back to thinking about what is a carbon credit fundamentally, right? Carbon credit fundamentally is data applied to a policy framework or a methodology. So you basically collect data on source at the site of where you're doing your carbon project that says this is the amount of carbon in this year that is being captured or prevented from being emitted. Take that data, submit it to a issuing body or a standard that applies that data to a policy framework and a methodology, and out the other side comes a carbon credit. If you didn't already know, this is a perfect use case for blockchain, right? Where you have this transparency layer, you have the data stored on chain, and you can have sort of new and innovative ways of creating carbon credits and measuring and doing that measurement and verification the way Open Forest is.
Super cool. So we've talked a lot about carbon, but it's not only about carbon. ReFi is larger than carbon, and I think one point to make also is that it's a growing space, and it's also a space where we collaborate a lot together. As an example, when we started our project back in 2020, we were thinking about building a marketplace because there were no marketplaces for on-chain carbon credits. And then, sometime later, you have Flow Carbon, you have Toucan, you have Talo, you have other companies building those amazing things that we can plug in. So no need for us to actually build that piece. And so it's a space where collaboration is really at heart. And just to give you an example, there is now a collective called Climate Collective. And I'm super happy to be here today and representing Near because we are one of the first ReFi project on Near, but I'm seeing more and more projects coming to Near, but also Flow Carbon now moving to Near. Celo was kind of the core L1 for ReFi in the space back in the days, but now we are seeing more movement and consolidation, and which is great because working together will actually bring us where we need to be a lot faster, and that's really the spirit of where we are today.
Yeah, the interoperability amongst chains is going to be a huge part of this, especially because carbon credits are going to be created in different places. They're going to be traded in different places. They're going to be use cases in different places. And so making sure that this almost base level asset is available in all ecosystems is super important. And one of the reasons why it's super important to have this asset on chain and to have it available everywhere is so that we can build financing vehicles on it, so that we can bring the promise of DeFi to this market and really build an incredibly robust capital market for carbon credits, essentially one of the first real asset, off-chain assets to come on-chain and build a capital markets around it. We have that opportunity right now. And the reason is that we can take, there's essentially over the course of the next decade or so, there needs to be over $1 trillion of financing put into carbon projects. And in order to do that, you have to create structured products and credit systems around these projects to get them early stage capital, and doing that in a way that the normal financial system can understand and underwrite risk. And so the beauty of this is you can actually do this using forward contracts. And so you can take a forward contract, basically the agreement to purchase from a carbon project their carbon credits when they are produced, the same way that airlines agree to buy airplanes 10 years from now as they're produced. It's the same forward contract mentality. And we can take those forward contracts, and by the way, this is done in other industries all over the place, including with airplanes, and we can use those to back and build structured products around. And by doing those forward contracts on chain, where you have the delivery of the underlying, what fulfills the contract as a token, right, a carbon credit being delivered to the smart contract that is that forward contract, you now have that complete trustless state. On top of that, you can then take those carbon credits that investors put capital into and sell them into a liquid market that's also on chain. And so you create this very elegant, trustless, self-executing, deep financial system that you can then take and build very complex derivatives on top of. And if you're thinking about $1 trillion market, similar to like the mortgage-backed security market, at the end of the day, it hopefully will be very easy to onboard large institutional capital into this, because they didn't ask the question before 2008 when they were investing in mortgage-backed security, what database is all this information stored in? Now we're going to actually move that forward and say, these are investable products for you, where the database is transparent. You actually can see where all the money is moving, what derivatives are built on top of it, and actually prevent some of the things that happened in 2008 from happening.
Super cool. So, yeah, I think one point also to make beside the voluntary carbon market is that there is a lot of room to build awesome solution with Web3. I've been talking yesterday to many people having awesome ideas in different, different aspects of what we can do to address climate, sustainability, governance, and it's really a space where I invite you to deep dive. I talk to people around and just learn about what's happening, because of course us are addressing kind of the high-level issues, the main issues, but there are so many other issues to address. Eventually on the plastic side of things, how to address the collection of plastic, the waste. How do you address the waste issues? How do you address eventually renewable energy with blockchain? How you address all those different issues? There is ESG DAO now building on Near. With a very consumer approach on how to rate products with an ESG approach. So rating products is also something that is coming up. So there's a whole lot of things that we can build, and Near is really becoming the place to do that.
Yeah, the whole space is incredibly exciting. Near is a great place to be building, and some of the announcements coming out of Near this week are just, I'm super excited to see how that's going to help propel this space forward.
Same here. Thanks a lot for your attention, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.